It's time again for the Insiders with Chuck Chvala and Scott Jensen, sponsored by the Wisconsin Counties Association and the Tommy G. Thompson Center on Public Leadership.
I'm Chuck Chvala, former Senate Majority Leader.
And I'm Scott Jensen, former Assembly Speaker.
We're the Insiders. So, Scott, as you know, we are one of not that many states that does a biennial budget, 2-year budget. So this is the big one must-pass piece of legislation that we get in the state of Wisconsin, and it has all the spending and oftentimes a lot of policy. So what's your take on where the budget's headed? I mean, the Finance Committee has already done some of the road shows. Where are we headed?
Well, everyone thinks the budget is all about policy and numbers, but of course, the budget right before a general election, where the governor's up for re-election, tends to be a lot more about politics. So my guess here is that, Governor Evers is likely to run again for re-election. If he wants to run again for re-election, he's going to want to have essentially a steady as she goes, smooth budget process where he gets a few wins, and unfortunately for him, he has to give up a few wins to the Republicans. What he doesn't want is a long, drawn-out fight. He wants to, I think, to get that done. The Republicans, they want one item in particular. They would like, the state sitting on a huge surplus. They'd like to give it back to people at a time where a lot of people are beginning to, things are getting a little tight. Things are getting a little difficult in the family budget. It's time that the state, which has a huge surplus, give a little bit back to the family budget. So the Republicans will be fighting for a tax cut. They'd like that to be separate from the budget to make sure the governor signs it and that the money actually does go back to people before they settle some of the other issues on the budget. That has put them at loggerheads before, but it sounds like the two sides are talking now, and I think that's promising, and hopefully they can get something done. Plus, part of the budget's already been decided, right? The recent Supreme Court decision with regards to the governor's veto on school aids means that 40-some% of the state budget has already been settled. So that's the lines that they're within. I think the one element of uncertainty is the federal cuts, because right now you have cuts being done by administrative action. At some point, they're going to have to be part of a federal budget. We won't get the federal budget till October. We'll have passed our budget long before that here in Wisconsin. So what do you do if there's a possibility of cuts, but you might want to backfill some of those? Other ones you're going to just let happen. Usually what you do is you set money aside, right? And put it in the joint finances account. And then the governor and the legislature decide how to release that. But lately, the powers of the Joint Finance Committee to do that sort of stuff have been questioned by the Supreme Court and by the governor. I hope there's a way to do that, because you certainly don't want the legislature to have to come back and reopen the state budget to figure out what they're going to do with regards to federal cuts. So hopefully they'll have enough money for the tax cuts that Republicans want, some of the spending priorities that the governor wants, and to set money aside to make sure that Wisconsin can absorb any cuts that come from a federal budget cuts or from a recession, which is a possibility as well.
Scott's brought up a lot of possibilities. Let me give you a couple of counterintuitive thoughts. I think that budgets are the place where really good political leaders can be the most creative. And let's think about this a little bit. Scott is absolutely right. The governor may well and probably will run for re-election. He hasn't made that announcement. And Robin Vos may or may not run for speaker. But I'll tell you one thing that Robin Vos, I'm sure, is savvy enough to realize, and that is there's a chance that not only the state Senate, which will be Democratic after the next election, especially after what happened with Trump getting in and what he's doing now, but also the speaker may no longer be in the majority. Robin Vos desperately, I think, and he does a good job of amassing this, wants to get that surplus spent, because it's entirely possible that if he doesn't come back with a majority or a really tight majority, or only a very tight majority, those dollars could be spent on property tax relief and school aids, and there wouldn't be any income tax relief done. Creatively, Governor Evers might say, the die is pretty much cast for next year. The Republicans and Donald Trump, this is going to be a referendum next year on Donald Trump. And because there are uncertainties about the federal budget, I simply could go in here and say, hey, we need to hold off, see what we're going to have. We don't want to be in a deficit. I'm going to hold off and not spend the money. That means Robin Voss doesn't have anything to run on. People say, maybe it is time to have a different majority in there. And let's see what the Democrats can do on their own, especially if they message correctly about where they'd like to spend it, which would be property tax relief, which is becoming a bigger issue, and on schools and K-12 schools. I think with that kind of a message, they could get away with not doing anything. And frankly, that's a danger zone for Robin Voss, because he'll say, well, I'll just wait till next time. No, you may not have the majority next time. And by the way, if you don't get that tax cut done, you have nothing to run on. So the counterintuitive approach here is to keep that, especially if you're a Democrat. You look at the winds and the way they're blowing. The winds are blowing for Democrats in Wisconsin next year. With the Trump victory, the off-year elections are not good. Already, Wisconsin seems to be getting a little bit bluer. You just saw what happened in the Supreme Court race, and next year's a gubernatorial race. Again, a lower turnout. What does that tell me? Democrats are in the ascendancy. Why do you want to spend billions of dollars on Republican priorities when you can wait another 18 months and you can spend it any way you want? I'll be interested to see if these negotiations go very far, because if they go too far, if Robin Voss pushes his advantage that he thinks he has too far, I think he could end up with nothing. And that could be a situation where Republicans are heading into next year with nothing to run on.
Chuck, you and I had a budget gridlock once where we didn't have a budget for quite a while. And one of the things that made me calm as the Republican leader during all that is, and a lot of people may not know this, is in Wisconsin, we don't shut down government when you don't pass a budget. We work off the old budget, which means no increases, except for the ones apparently now required by the Supreme Court. So
ding, 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 goes the magic word, Scott. But
right, you could get those increases through, but you wouldn't get any other increases through, and there would be no tax cuts. And that would mean property taxes would go up in 2026, and there would be a fair amount of local government mind losing. They would be losing their minds and screaming bloody murder, because you remember that's what they did to us when we went 100 days without a budget. And they just kept pounding on people, and we were getting blamed for that. I don't think the governor wants to get blamed for that heading into the 26 elections, and I don't think he wants chaos, and I don't think he wants a smaller budget, and I don't think he wants to be blamed for the property tax that will increase that will inevitably come from that sort of actions. But we'll see. I mean,
well, but Scott, I mean, you said the important thing, which is that because of this veto, and this is one of the reasons why Robin Voss wanted to wait and see what happened. His hand is less. The governor's hand is better, because there is at least a per pupil increase for public schools that's contained in this budget. And I think the governor would say, I think the dynamics for next year are an awful lot better for us than they are for Republicans. Let's see how this election goes, and then put out a plan during the campaign about what you'd want to do with that money. I think that's a winning strategy. And by the way, he's already got in his pocket, was it $200 and some per pupil? That's not a bad little additional amount of money to have for the next go round.
we will see. That's why they play the game.
We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to The Insider with Chuck Chvala and Scott Jensen, sponsored by the Wisconsin Counties Association and the Tommy G. Thompson Center on Public Leadership.